Balance, harmony, freedom, those were the tenets of Mattathios's new life. He was to take up the path of a faceless champion of the Magistrati, his life now to wander the world in service and search of redemption. He was accustomed to traveling in heavy armor, but only time and patience could make a new set feel comfortable. His left greave dug into his upper shin with each of his long, graceful strides. A plate in his brigandine rubbed against his collarbone with each breath. But worst of all was the mask he bore. Not only was it restricting his peripheral vision, and its narrowed mouth slit labored his breath, it would also offer little in the way of physical protection, the complete opposite of the helmets he was accustomed to. Mattathios could not bring himself to complain, though. Most of these things could all be easily fixed by a blacksmith once he had made it to the nearest trade city, and the pain was soft as a mother's kiss compared to what he had been through, and a mercy compared to what he had inflicted upon others. He reminded himself that each moment of uncomfort in his life was now a blessing, an atonement for his sinful past, and a reminder of his new purpose. After all that happened in the past few months, Mattathios was elated to be traveling the countryside again. He enjoyed the peaceful isolation it provided, a respite from all that had transpired recently. As a magistrati, his goal was to help those in need, to defend the freedom of all sentient beings to express their free will. For his first few years as a new magistrati, he was tasked with traveling the land in search of those in need. He would slowly make his way to the capital, going village to village, trade city to hold fast along the way. But for now, he simply had to enjoy the open road. It was a crisp and beautiful late winter's day, and the sun was shining brightly in the midday sky. Of all the beauty nature had to offer, the sun and the moon still affected Mattathios the most. As a lunavite of the Underdark, he had spent his childhood never seeing the sky at all. His people still worshipped their moon goddess and knew the sun, god of the sun elves. But to see them for himself, perched in their astral abode, it was still a wonder, even after his years on the surface world. The magistrati's sanctum he was leaving was, in truth, little more than a ruined holdfast, with a crumbling watchtower in the foothills overlooking a secluded valley. It had taken Mattathios more than 5 days to cross the valley on foot, and now, near the northern end, he was just one day's walk away from the first marked settlements on his map. The village was not named on the map, which was a few decades old. The magistrati had given him an old map on purpose. They explained that to have faith in their code meant being adaptable and handling uncertainty with grace. To this end, they wanted Mattathios to fill in and update the map himself, using it as a log of his travels. This also helped the magistrati remember that the world is a balance of order and chaos, that change is ever present, and yet some things stay the same. As he walked, the sun started to disappear behind the mountains, leaving the valley in darkness. Many fear this time of day and would have sought shelter in preparation for its coming. But as a Luna Vitae, Mattathios was just beginning to feel alive. His large eyes adjusted quickly to the dark, and his keen senses became even sharper at night. His youth in the Underdark, it, there was no need to track the day and night cycles. As a mercenary on the surface, his band of Lunavitae had specialized in night scouting and raids. But now, as a magistrati, Mattathios had to get more used to wandering during the day. As the magistrati ever do, Mattathios sought a balance. He would now sleep twice a day, around noon and around midnight. This way he would drift to sleep after meditating, allowing him to absorb light energy during his midday sleep and absorb chaos energy around midnight. This new schedule would take some getting used to, but it had its benefits. He could travel uninterrupted in the dark, and it meant he was up and ready for action when the dusk set in, which is usually when most crimes happen. This night, Mother Moon shone in a beautiful waxing crescent, symbolizing the start of a new journey to the Luna Vitae. Mattathios smiled beneath his mask at the serendipity of the moment and muttered a quiet prayer of gratitude to the universe. It was then he heard it, A faint whisper in the distance. It sounded almost like an elf, but somehow cold and distorted. This sort of thing put commoners to flight, but to Mattathios it caused a primal stirring in his gut. The thrill of a danger, the pure ecstasy of being in the flow state of battle. It reminded him of the old days, when such a rush was the only thing that made his life worth living. As a mercenary captain, Mattathios had faced this danger before. Wraiths were once elves who were cursed, bound to the site of their death through foul deeds or dark sorcery. They haunted the land, seeking to kill all sentient life that came near. They are ephemeral in nature, spending most of their time incorporeal, but quickly shifting to become tangible right before attacking. In his past life, Mattheos would have given the Wraith a wide berth. No reason to risk such an encounter. But now, as a Magistrati, he was equipped with all the tools and knowledge he would need. He must end the Wraith, because it was a foul manifestation of destructive chaos, a soul no longer capable of its own free will. He merely had to reach out with his senses to detect the spirit, and slowly creep up on it. At the top of a small ridge, just inside the tree line of a small forest, Mattathios spotted his prey. One lone wraith drifting back and forth aimlessly, seemingly talking to itself in torment. It had not heard Mattathios yet, and seemed distracted. Mattathios recited the Magistrati's pre-battle litany to clear his mind. What am I supposed to do if I want to talk about peace and understanding? If I want to tell you the path you choose leads to downfall, but you only understand the language of the sword, I must let the blade do the talking. So my tongue shall become iron. And he drew his sword, and my words naught but fury. This last line was boldly yelled aloud by the Magistrati, and as he did so, the mask he bore became alive with swirling golden light and dark purplish tendrils of void energy. Mattathios then stomped the ground, and where his foot struck, a low-lying, dense fog emerged. A mass of the same swirling gold light and grasping void tendrils of his mask spread across the ground, surrounding the Magistrati in the combined energies of light and darkness, order and chaos. He then uttered a few words and ran his hand along the blade, suffusing it with a radiant light. Mattathios then lowered into his stance, shield held out in front of him and sword held high, awaiting all the wrath the Wraith could muster. The Wraith was startled by the initial battle cry, not used to be snuck up on by any living creature. It gave a shriek and began to advance. But once it saw its prey surround itself in light and energy, it let out a cackle, became incorporeal, and faded away. Mattathios waited in his stance for what seemed like an age. It was his first time being able to test out his newfound abilities on a real foe, and he had brought it all to bear eagerly. After a few seconds of standing his ground in full glory, he realized it was all for naught. The Wraith must have sensed his immense power and knew better than to attack. Mattathios sheathed his blade and stepped out of his circle of power, and reveled in the fact that a mere display of his might sent the servant of destructive chaos fleeing. Though he could no longer sense the Wraith, he knew its bodily remains must be close by. He needed to bless the remains to set the Wraith free from its tormented existence. He closed his eyes and reached out with his magical senses for the remains. He was still trying to get used to his new magical senses, but one thing was certain. He was close to a place of power. It was getting close to midnight, and Mattathios knew he should be searching for a safe place to rest for a few hours. But after the exhilarating encounter with the Wraith, the last thing on his mind was sleep. He moved towards the place of power he sensed, thinking he would quickly cleanse the Wraith, and then rest in this place of power. As he made his way through the dark forest, he noticed all had gone deathly quiet. No more sounds of small game rustling through the brush, no whoosh of an owl wings descending on its prey, not even the soft but ever-present buzzing and clattering of insects. As he crested a small hill, Mattathios froze at the sight below him. Tucked into the hillside, in a small clearing, was a stone altar in front of 3 massive stone pillars that seemed to rise up from the foot of the hill. This type of altar was unfamiliar to Mattathios, but it was not what caused his blood to run cold. That was from the massive bodies that lay scattered throughout the area. Some were just bones and pieces of rusted armor, others reeked of decay, and a few even looked fresh. Mattathios inched quietly down into the clearing and made his way to the altar. It was a single giant slab of stone, smooth on all surfaces, but had an indent in the middle, with channels running out of it to the 4 corners, all caked in dried blood. He then looked up at the 3 pillars in front of him. Just as he gazed at the central pillar, he felt a cold breeze and heard a familiar cackle. He whirled around to see the wraith from earlier, about 40 yards behind him. This time, the wraith was not alone. Moving into the grove from the tree line on all sides were 5 similar monstrosities. Mattathios had been so certain the wraith had fled his mighty presence earlier that he never considered the monster was just baiting the trap. He had been so eager to test out his new powers, making his first fight as a Magistrati a memorable one. Well, the universe had answered, and given him just what he desired. A single wraith was capable of skewering a man with a single hit. 6 wraiths was a death sentence for a battalion of common infantry. Mattathios chuckled at his stupidity, gave a word of praise to the universe for the years of life he had, and drew his blade. As the wraiths closed in, Mattathios let out a guttural roar and stomped his foot onto the ground, beginning his dance with destiny.